Thank you, Marty. So I am Mario Saltarelli. I am the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Medical Officer of GABA. I'll just say my background is in medicine, in neurology, in psychiatry, and for 25 plus years in pharmaceutical industry, developing a variety of different drugs. My partner here, Richard Farrell, will introduce himself next.
Hello, Richard Farrell. I'm a co-founder, Chief Financial Officer, and Chief Operating Officer of GABA Therapeutics. My background is corporate finance and investment banking.
Very good. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So I joined GABA about a year ago because I saw the power and the potential of the lead asset of GABA, which is called GRX-917. And I spent a long time in development and in pharma, and mostly worked on projects that didn't work. This one will work, and it's because of the story we're going to be telling you. We're developing GRX-917 for treatment of anxiety. As Marty mentioned, it is a nearly identical molecule to an established French anxiety medication that's been available in France since 1979. Our molecule has improved dosing, but our molecule also has global IP that is going to allow us to launch it globally and be able to capture the amazing profile that's already been demonstrated. And that profile is quite unique. It is superior to any available anxiety medication. And we know this because of all the data that's been published over 14 years. Tens of millions of patients in France have utilized this drug. And its profile is quite defined. And so, with regards to GABA, we formed the company to be able to move forward this drug, which is patent protected, which has global IP, and which is going to be starting major clinical trials in 2024 with potential launch in 2026. And so I'll move on from that. So you probably know that mental health is a problem. It's an increasing problem for a whole variety of reasons. There's a huge amount of unmet medical need that exists. And anxiety is at the top of the list. It's the most common mental health disorder in the US. There are more than 40 million anxiety patients in the US. And remarkably, about half of those actually are not receiving treatment. So they have a diagnosis of anxiety, and yet they're not receiving treatment. They need therapy, they're not receiving treatment. And this is primarily because the currently available drug classes really are inadequate. They're either have a lot of side effects, they have poor safety, or they really don't work very well. And huge societal costs. Next slide, please. So GRX-917 will address I would say the failures of the current therapies and provide a treatment option for that 40 to 50% of patients that currently are diagnosed but aren't being treated because they're either not being treated adequately or because the side effects are too high. The key profile here is that this drug will have superior onset of action, very rapid. It will have superior efficacy, and the side effects will be minimal to none, which is truly unique across all therapeutics for anxiety. And so we put this quote here from an investor that has been reviewing our package, and we thought it was really quite attuned to exactly what the product profile is, and that is better than Xanax. So you don't have to get into all this wonky stuff about key attributes and things like that. It's better than Xanax. It's safer. It's safer. Next slide. Very good. And this is just more data showing, how favorably GRX-917, based on data that already exists, compares to the other major classes. So these are called the serotonin reuptake inhibitors and the benzodiazepines, like Xanax. And what you can see there, color-coded, is that, you've got green for onset of action, very rapid onset, like the benzodiazepines. It's got high efficacy, like the benzodiazepines. The side effect profile is minimal to none. And so that's actually better than the other two major classes that have been available for about 20 years. And so, we're really excited because the profile of superior is going to provide a major impact in terms of unmet medical need for anxiety patients. And this is going to be available in the near term. It's first-line anxiety medication. Next slide. Very good. So why can we be so confident about the profile of this drug? Well, it's really because of this French drug from which GRX-917 was modified. That drug is called etifoxine. It's been available since 1979, but the patents expired a long time ago. And so it's only been generic in France and a few other countries for a short period of time. The founders of GABA actually identified this drug as being an opportunity for something called deuteration. And so we'll show you a little bit later. This is a well-established, a little bit wonky, but way in which you can turn one molecule into a patented molecule and thereby allow for investment to be able to bring it to the rest of the world where it's not currently available. And so this play has been utilized a number of different times, highly successful. We'll show you some examples. To be able to identify really good profile drugs that might be out there, be able to establish intellectual property protection to allow it to be developed and brought to other areas of the world or for different uses. And so just in short, clinical efficacy will be the same. Clinical safety will be the same. We've actually already shown the safety bit. And another investor said, we know that GRX-917 works. That's a very powerful statement. And it is based on what we've seen with this drug and what we've seen with other deuterated drugs. They are essentially identical. Next slide, please. This is an eye chart for you. We're not going to go through it. It is just a portion of the amount of data that exists in the published literature that is accessed that confirms that this drug will work. It confirms its efficacy in anxiety. There is a similar number of studies that have been published that confirm the safety. And so we'll leave it at that. And GRX-917 will be equivalent to etifoxine. We know that that actually portends substantially lower risk profile for investment and for development of this drug. These are examples of some successful deuterated products. And, some of these are very recent. But what I can tell you is that pharma understands this concept. Pharma is very, very interested. We're talking big pharma here. These are big, well-known names for the most part. And pharma knows this because they understand the concept of low-risk drug development and how that can actually increase valuation. And so this gives you kind of a small sampling of some of the drugs that are out there. I will tell you that none of the drugs have been going into markets that are as big as anxiety. These are all big potential market drugs, and we're very hopeful that that big pharmas are understanding this, and they're going to see a low risk profile of deuteration and want to work with us as we go forward. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the company as we wrap up, but GABA Therapeutics really has, we're kind of a lean and mean organization. We've only been around for about 4 years. We don't really have very many FTEs. We use primarily consultants, and we've been remarkably efficient through strategies that Richard has put in place to be able to advance the company on relatively small amounts of money and investment so far. So we've only had a single Series A investment of $16.5 million. That was started back in 2019. And with that money, what we've been able to do is advance a preclinical stage molecule through initial and robust clinical phase 1 testing, prove the safety, and also come a long ways towards proving the efficacy with a biomarker that we actually developed de novo. And so really what we are now in is a pure execution mode. And if we execute, and we can, we have the funding to be able to execute, in the next slide, we can actually get to market, get to an NDA filing by 2026. with a high degree of likelihood of success. And so this is our very streamlined plan. It's really focusing on the low-hanging fruit. It's focusing on one indication, as opposed to the many that are possible. One indication, which is called generalized anxiety disorder. And it's using modern drug development and regulatory techniques to be able to expedite the package that will be needed to be able to file this new drug application to the FDA. And so again, we believe that if things work out well, we have a plan here that can be executed so that we're filing the NDA at the beginning of 2026. Highly efficient drug development. And I'll now turn it over to Richard.
So we estimate approximately 50 million is required to get through what Mario calls an interim readout in phase 2, which brings us to the end of Q4 2024, following which we'll initiate the phase 3 part of the phase 2/3 and potentially a second phase 3. We might not need to do a second phase 3, but that will be determined by FDA. And we also plan to IPO sometime in 2024, depending upon the market. So for approximately $100 million, we will have a drug on market in generalized anxiety disorder, which is by far the largest anxiety indication. And it's a very, very large market with large market potential. One other point I want to make is our clinical consultants have advised us the FDA are actively seeking a replacement for benzodiazepines, which is safe. Again, this drug has the onset and efficacy of benzos, but is safe and non-addictive. So our consultant thinks that they will embrace this program.
And so if you're familiar with the usual costs of drug development, pharma projects $1 billion, to get a drug to market. This is a remarkably lean cost, a lean development program, markedly reduced costs, and also with an upended, abnormally low risk profile because of the deuteration concept. And so the combination of those two is actually going to translate into substantial incremental value as we plug through this program and get to NDA.
And the intent is an IPO at 2025?
Yeah, we think it could come in earlier than that, depending upon the markets. We've already got strong interest from, we already started receiving term sheets from preeminent life science crossover funds. And we've got big pharma in our data room as well, full transparency. So there's a lot of interest around this compound and its profile. And we think that many of our CNS peers, which have sort of $7+ billion market caps, have comparable compounds on market. So we think that there's sufficient interest for an IPO in 2024.
I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. John, you're on.
Hello?
I hear you. Yeah, it's on.
Can you hear me? So I take it that the mode of action is as a GABAergic, or is it a GABA receptor sensitizer?
Yeah, it's actually neither, and we'd love to take you through all the details about what I'm going to say right now. What we know is that this drug is actually a unique mechanism. There probably is some GABAergic activity. We have evidence for that, but the drug itself is working by increasing the brain endogenous neurosteroid production. And so neurosteroids are a type of neuromodulator, neurotransmitter that actually are involved in disease. And so there are a number of diseases like anxiety, like depression, that are neurosteroid deficiency diseases. And so you can kind of think of this as the way to have the brain naturally replace the deficient neurosteroids that are present in this disease. That's the mechanism, and there's a lot of data that supports that as the mechanism.
Okay, so when you deuterate this molecule, it's a simple heavy hydrogen substitution for hydrogen. is it imparting any differences at all, or is it exactly the same in terms of PK/PD and all that sort of thing? And were it to be treated, I assume it's not treated exactly the same, otherwise the FDA wouldn't require you to go through the program of development. But the question then arises that once you get it on the market here and it's available generically in Europe, couldn't there be a leakage in terms of utilization of the generic form, the old drug, in other words, instead of the high-priced domestic drug that you're developing?
Sure, happy to discuss. There's really two questions there. So I'll take the latter one first. So, beyond our issued composition of matter patent, which is global, it's in 90% of the world anxiety market. And that includes US, Europe, China, Japan, and all the other major markets. Besides that, there's also exclusivity and protection because the non-deuterated form was never developed outside of France. And so, although it is available in France, it's not available in the rest of Europe. It was never developed for the rest of Europe. It's not available in the US. It was never developed in the US. And so there's no opportunity for leakage or generic ANDA competition or 505(b)(2) from etifoxine. That being said, to your first question, GRX-917 as a deuterated molecule is essentially identical in terms of efficacy, safety, biology, receptor binding, all that good stuff. Where it is different, and you obviously know the area, is that oftentimes deuterated molecules will be found to have slightly different pharmacokinetics. And we found that there were marked differences, which are actually marked improvements in the pharmacokinetics of our GRX-917, which actually converted the drug into a once-a-day dosing at a much, much lower dose. So that's all beneficial. The two drugs are actually different. The deuterated versus the non-deuterated form are completely different, even if there is going to be competition in France.
We've got time for one more question.
Yes.
I have a question. And speaking from personal experience, where we've lost money is because companies didn't do their NDAs in an optimal fashion. And the back and forth with the governing bodies was atrocious. Anyway, so now people are tending to use AI, consultants, and blah, 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 to try to make that more efficient. What are you doing to give me comfort that that NDA submission is going to be top notch and you're not going to lose time going back and forth with the FDA?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I have more than 25 years of history in the pharmaceutical industry, most of that actually in big pharma. And so, the methodology that we will be using is the methodology that I've honed after multiple successful interactions with the FDA. I think the key way to ensure that you are doing things right and keeping the company moving forward and not making a mistake is close interaction with regulators at all stages. And, a regulatory suggestion is actually not a suggestion. It is what they tell you to do. And so, you partner with the FDA early on in appropriate fashions. You listen to what they have to say. If you can make a rational scientific argument, they will oftentimes deviate from their prior experience. And, this particular drug, because of the known history of the non-deuterated form of etifoxine, is going to be viewed remarkably favorably by the FDA. And so I think the way to avoid some late stage problems by the FDA is you work with the FDA and you basically do what they tell you to do. If you want to do something and they say no, then you probably shouldn't do that because it's not going to work out very well for you.